Well, Donald Trump has won the presidency in the United States. And so if you're watching this in America, like myself, obviously, unless you're living under a rock, you've probably heard that. So I'm going to talk about not so much what has just happened last night, but what is going to be happening, in my opinion, over the coming months and coming years here when it comes to Bitcoin. I think that no matter what your political views, I think this is very exciting for Bitcoin, not just because of Donald Trump, but because of the Overton window that it represents. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about a few of the big catalysts for Bitcoin, kind of to summarize it. Bitcoin hit an all-time high last night of $75,000. Of course, then it quickly wicked back down to 73, so it was short-lived, but there's a lot of momentum happening, and a lot of people are starting to reach out to me and asking, I've got capital on the sidelines. Should I wait for another dip? Should I go ahead and buy now? Right? A lot of people are wondering, should I start buying? Should I, wait to start buying? Should I DCA? Should I lump sum? So in this video, I'm going to talk about those things, just my opinions, how high I think Bitcoin can go in the short to medium term, as well as what's the best way to get there, lump sum, DCA, everything else. I'm going to do my best to talk about those catalysts and hopefully more than anything, just give some perspective. So without a further ado of my introductory rambling, let us go to this. So, as you know, Donald Trump is elected president of the United States 2024 presidential election. Obviously, there's a few states yet to be counted and or yet to conclude counting, include Michigan, my home state. But it looks like no matter what, Trump seems to be in the path to the White House. Although, of course, plenty of weeks for lots and lots of shenanigans to happen. So we'll see. But my encouragement for you to keep in mind, more than anything, no matter if you love Trump, you hate Trump, whatever, the emphasis I would like to share today is that we have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. This is something I've talked about a lot for years because it's when it hit me a few years ago, that's something that is just kind of solidified in my mind. It seems to be something that people resonate with, right? It doesn't matter whether, you think the future is optimistic or you think the future is pessimistic. Either way, we have less in common with it than we do today. If the future is pessimistic and it's horrible and it's awful and Bitcoin goes to zero and the world collapses and we have war and millions of people die, well, then we have less in common with that future than everything we've lived through in our lifetime, right? And likewise, if the future is really optimistic and, Bitcoin takes over the world, it goes $10 million and we avoid major wars and major recessions and all kinds of wonderful things, right? If we do all that and have major productivity and scientific advances, well, then we still have less in common with the future in the past, right? So, no matter what your, emotional state is this morning, I think most of you are probably happier than not. But I think no matter what, that's the important thing to keep in mind. We have less in common with the future than the past. This is true of American politics, and this is true with Bitcoin price. So, number one, okay, I'm going to go through 3 or 4 different catalysts here. Number one catalyst, Donald Trump is now elected as president. I think Bitcoin was going to go up either way, no matter if Donald or no matter if Trump or Harris were elected. I think they would have gone up for different reasons. I think if Harris was elected, I think Bitcoin would have mostly gone up as a factor of nominal appreciation. Now that Trump is going up, I think it's much more likely Bitcoin actually also has significant returns in real terms as well, right? Although on the other hand, maybe it didn't matter at all. Who knows? She didn't win, he won, so we'll never know what that path of destiny had. But a few things to keep in mind. The freeing of Ross Ulbricht is very exciting. I was texting Lynn, his mom, last night, congratulating her and a few other people that are, friends of the Ulbrichts. So that's very exciting. That has a very small impact on Bitcoin price, basically non-existent. But I think it is something that's little and it's important just to recognize because that's very exciting for the narrative of Bitcoin. Now, let's talk about the things that do have a catalyst in Bitcoin price. The first one is your national stockpile of Bitcoin strategically of 200,000 Bitcoin, a few 100,000 Bitcoin. That's something that Trump has promised to do. Of course, there's a probability he does not fulfill that promise or someone doesn't let him fulfill that promise or whatever. That is possible. And there's also the possibility of a 4 million, not 400,000, 4 million Bitcoin stockpile. That's something that Kennedy talked about in the 2024 Bitcoin Nashville event. And we have a, very wide coalition and range of people on the team Trump right now that are pro Bitcoin or at least Bitcoin adjacent, right? Elon Musk, of course, is, as of right now, the officially recognized richest person in the world, essentially, more or less. And he is into Bitcoin. He's Bitcoin adjacent. He seems to appreciate Bitcoin, but obviously it's not his main focus. But he's going to be on the team. Kennedy is much more focused on Bitcoin than Musk. And, like I said, was the guy that was talking about America buying 4 million. Vivek is into Bitcoin, and JD also has Bitcoin. JD has 6 Bitcoin that he stores on Coinbase. So all 4 of these guys, we know, own Bitcoin to some degree and will be not hostile towards it. So I think that's very exciting. Also, the elimination of Gary Gensler of the SEC chair, I think that is very optimistic on Bitcoin too. Right now, the point is, no matter what happens to any of these things, the point I want to make here very clear is that I'm not saying any of these things or all these things will happen. Like, there's a lot of things that could go wrong here. However, a lot can happen between now and 2029. I think that is the thing that I really want to emphasize here, to think in terms of probabilities. This is something I posted last night. I said, with Trump, the odds of the United States stockpiling 4 million Bitcoin by executive order within months have just increased by a factor of 10, right? And this is why I highly encourage everyone to think in terms of probabilities. I still think it is a very low probability that the United States within the next, let's say 2 to 5 years decides to start stockpiling Bitcoin, like millions of Bitcoin. I still think that's incredibly unlikely anytime soon. However, if we're thinking in terms of probabilities, Kamala has, or Harris has 0 people on her campaign that were talking about that. Trump has at least 1 person on the campaign talking about it, right? We had on stage last night with his victory speech, all of the people I mentioned before, including people from Standard Chartered, of course, the Winklevoss twins and other people are pro Bitcoin and are, supporting Trump, right? So we know that Harris had basically 0 people on her team that would be supportive of this idea. And now we have Trump, that there are multiple people supportive of this idea. So again, don't think in absolute terms. Like in reality, like nothing really has changed. But in terms of probabilities, I think everything has changed in the last 12 hours or so, right? Let's say, 12 hours ago, there was a 1 in 1,000 chance that the United States was going to start, smash buying 1 million Bitcoin or whatever in the next couple of years, right? A very, very small chance. But now, like, I think maybe there's a 1 in 100 chance, right? Like, that still means, that even if you don't like Trump, even if you trust Trump, even if whatever, like, that's still a 99% chance he doesn't, right? Like, still majority chance he doesn't. But the point is, again, think in probabilities. I think that we have increased the probability in the last 24 hours from 1 in 1,000 to now 1 in 100. And I really expect that that'll be doubled again at some point next year, right? Because again, 2029 is a long ways away, right? 2029 is a long ways away and a lot can change. Okay, imagine if we have president that is Bitcoin adjacent, right? Obviously, he has doing Trump coin and all his, cutesy little, money grab stuff or whatever, right? So of course, there's criticisms there, but I think that, again, the signal and the noise is that a lot can happen if you have a Bitcoin adjacent president during a massive Bitcoin bull run. I think that's something that is not really appreciated. And just as one final point to kind of hammer this perspective home is a post by my friend Jason Lowry. I've never done a show with Jason Lowry because he's ordered to not go on any more Bitcoin shows, but he did write the book Software. This is something he talks about. Jason posted last night, anybody have any recommendations on a good place to live near DC within a 30-minute commute to the White House or Pentagon? Asking for a friend. Funny, funny. And I, of course, then commented after that, to focus on the signal here, right? Obviously this is a, passive way to hint that he's going to be working soon, likely, with the Trump campaign. This is something they talked about. Okay, they mentioned Larry by name. They mentioned Caitlin Long by name. They mentioned Michael Saylor by name. These are the people they want on the team, and all 3 of those folks, and as well as Cynthia Lummis and many other people, all of those folks obviously are going to be pro-Bitcoin. So if that were to happen, okay, again, and we're talking a small chance, if that were to happen, 0.5% chance, 1%, 2%, I don't know. Nobody knows what the odds actually are. But if that were to happen, that would be a huge catalyst for Bitcoin price. It probably wouldn't smash buy up front, but it would probably start buying over a consistent period of time. It would be a new buyer of last resort. And speaking of buyers of last resort, we have, to a much, much smaller degree, Mr. Michael Saylor, who within the last week, has announced another $42 billion acquisition plan for Bitcoin. Let that sink, 42 billion. That's a lot more than what they've done combined. And that's what they're wanting to do over the next 3 years, right? Now, for context, let's say there's 3 million Bitcoin available to be bought or sold, between people that are willing sellers. And let's say right now Bitcoin price is $75,000, roughly. That is $225 billion of Bitcoin, $250 billion of Bitcoin available for sale. This $42 billion buy from MicroStrategy is going to be 18% of them all, right? In reality, it's, probably a much lower number of coins because, the price of Bitcoin is going to rise from $75,000. However, I really think this 3 million Bitcoin number is very, very, conservative. I think it's very pessimistic, right? If that is not 3 million, but instead that's 1.5 million Bitcoin, that would not be 225 billion. That would be 112 billion roughly, or about a third of them all, right? So however you do the math, whether it's 18%, 36%, 50%, 10%, whatever, either way, this is a sign that we have yet another buyer that's going to be a last resort buyer over the next few years, right? Another way to think about it, and perhaps the better way to think about it, is that they are going to acquire roughly half of all the Bitcoin left to be issued between 2024 and 2140. However, that's not all. Okay, again, focus on the longer term picture here. What's more important than the Michael Saylor buy, $42 billion? What's more important is that Microsoft is openly considering copying MicroStrategy. Okay, Microsoft is a world-renowned company, right? If you say, "Oh, Michael bought more Bitcoin, MicroStrategy bought more Bitcoin," most people say, "Huh? What? Who? Who's that? What company is that?" Most people have no idea who Michael Saylor is. Most people have no idea what MicroStrategy is. People don't know, they don't care. But you say Microsoft has bought Bitcoin. Microsoft has issued convertible notes to buy Bitcoin. Microsoft has put 5% of their balance sheet into Bitcoin. You say that, people start to perk up. I remember back in 2021 when Tesla Motors, Elon Musk's company, announced they were moving something like 8% of their balance sheet to Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin went up something like 20% within a matter of hours, right? And so, am I saying Bitcoin will go up 20% if Microsoft adopts Bitcoin? Maybe, maybe not. But whatever the case, I think, again, the trend is more important than the data point alone, right? This is true with Donald Trump. The trend is more important than the data point. Likewise, Michael Saylor, the trend of buying more and buying more in size is more important than the 42 billion alone, and that's pretty important in my opinion. And again, the trend is more important than this, right? Michael Dell of Dell Computers has also said that he is pretty into Bitcoin. Jeff Bezos of Amazon is increasingly interested in Bitcoin. We don't know very much about what he thinks, but he's met with Michael Saylor multiple times, presumably discussing Bitcoin treasury strategy and why to acquire Bitcoin as an asset. Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook is a big Bitcoiner. Okay, in fact, I'm pretty sure, in case you didn't know, that Mark Zuckerberg owns a couple goats, and one of the goats' name is Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure about that. So Mark Zuckerberg probably owns a good amount of Bitcoin, and also uniquely with Meta, Zuckerberg has a significant portion of voting shares that he'd be able to acquire Bitcoin theoretically if that's something he desired to do. Likewise, additionally, Tim Cook of Apple has acquired Bitcoin. We haven't heard much from Tim Cook for a few years, but my point is, again, think about the trend, not the data point. Microsoft is openly, explicitly, I spelled that wrong, but you get the point, is explicitly considering copying MicroStrategy. They've named them by name, and I think it's going to be very, very important. If you have one of the Magnificent Seven outperforming the other Magnificent Seven, they're all going to be incentivized to copy. How do we bring our share price up? How do we give our CEOs more bonuses? How do we give our shareholders more value? How do we give our company more economic energy? The way to do that is to take this asset on our balance sheet, cash right now, which is a liability. It's losing somewhere between 2 to 5% purchasing power a year. Instead of that, let's take a portion of that and turn it into a creative asset like Bitcoin. Even if we're taking a 1% allocation from our cash, putting it in Bitcoin, if Bitcoin doubles, that completely negates the loss of that cash due to inflation, right? If you have 99% of your company's balance sheet in cash, and that loses 2% of value, but then you have that 1% that has tripled over the course of a couple of years, that gain has completely offset the inflation that was with that cash. And that company is going to be viewed as a superior balance sheet than other companies by investors. And then the worst case scenario is if that Bitcoin falls down, let's say by 0.5% or by 50%, that would be 0.5% on the balance sheet. And so instead of having a 2% loss on your balance sheet, you have a 2.5% loss on your balance sheet. So if you're an investor, if you're one of these major corporations, I think they're going to look and they're going to ask, why on earth are we not doing this? We have, to our cash position, we're already losing 2% a year. Maybe we'll lose 2.5% if Bitcoin falls 50%, which probably it won't because we're a big corporation and we're smart enough to not buy at stupid times, right? But the upside is that we completely negate all the inflation to our balance sheet. And therefore, from that alone, we might increase investor satisfaction and returns for investors. So again, focus on the trend, not the data point. It's not just the president. It's not just the Bitcoin crazy people like Michael Saylor. It's not just the traditional companies like the Magnificent Seven, like the companies I outlined here and more. Oh, of course, by the way, Tesla already owns Bitcoin, although they own a very small percentage of their balance sheet in Bitcoin. They could easily buy a bunch more, and perhaps they should be at the top of the list here because probably more before any of these other companies, including Microsoft, buys. I'm assuming Tesla would probably buy more since they're already off zero. But again, focus on the trend, not the data point. And so in a minute, I'll get to my Bitcoin price predictions. But the fourth thing I want to mention here, pension funds. Okay, just a couple days ago, there was a major UK pension fund that allocated 3% of its portfolio to Bitcoin. And now it is recommending other pension funds do the same, right? And they are quoted saying the logic is that as an asymmetric investment opportunity. If you put in 2%, the maximum you can lose 2% if this goes to zero, right? But the upside is potentially significant. If you look at the correlations of Bitcoin with 14 other asset classes, the 60-day correlation centers around zero. Investors need certain investment horizons, and it needs to fit within their risk appetite, right? 3% is a significant allocation. Now, again, back where I am, in good old Michigan, right, the Rust Belt, for whatever reasons, pension funds are adopting Bitcoin faster. Wisconsin was the first state in the United States to have its pension fund acquire Bitcoin. Michigan was the second state, and now Florida is discussing doing the same thing. Obviously, we won't know until it happens, but the point I'm making here is that these were swing states, okay? Florida was a relatively competitive state. Michigan and Wisconsin were extremely competitive states in this election, which just concluded where Donald Trump just won, right? And these states are adopting Bitcoin, right? These are, the most quote unquote bipartisan states in the entire nation, right? This isn't California. This isn't, with Montana, right? Like these are, solid swing states that are getting off zero when it comes to Bitcoin. Now, of course, these are very small allocations, way sub 1%, way sub 0.1%, right? So for the UK to come out in such size and have a pension fund begin to allocate not just a whole percentage, but a multi-whole percentage, in my opinion, that's a very big deal, right? I don't think this is the end. I think it's just the beginning. And just again, for context, a 7% global allocation would take us to $13 million per Bitcoin, a 7% allocation. Okay, this fund is allocating 3%. Now, am I saying we're going to have a 7% global allocation within 12 months? Bitcoin's going to, nuke straight up to $13 million? No, probably not, right? But again, think in probabilities, not in certainties, okay? If the world in the future decides on a 21% global allocation to Bitcoin, that is a $36 million Bitcoin, more or less, before inflation, okay? If over the course of the decade or two it takes for us to get to that 21% global allocation, if we were to merely only double the supply of currency units, that is $70 million, more or less, Bitcoin nominally per coin, right? Maybe that's 50, right? Maybe I'm being too optimistic. I don't know. Maybe it's 90. Maybe inflation's worse than, a doubling in currency units. But, my point is that no matter what, it doesn't matter how big your error bars are if your timeline is long enough, right? Now, instead of going up above the 7%, let's go below, right? Let's say a 1% allocation, actually not even a 1% allocation, a mere 7/10 of a 1% allocation. That's still $1 million Bitcoin, right? A lot of people buy Bitcoin or on the fence buying Bitcoin right now saying, oh, Luke, you think Bitcoin's going to go to 100 grand? You think Bitcoin's going to go to 200 grand? You think it's going to go 500 grand? I was saying this and shouting from the rooftops back, 18 to 20 months ago when Bitcoin was $18,000, telling people smash buy Bitcoin, start buying Bitcoin. $1 million is not late to Bitcoin. $1 million is early to Bitcoin. I'm saying the same thing now that Bitcoin's $75,000 and many people are still sitting on the sidelines. They're terrified to get a 1% allocation. They're terrified to double down and buy more Bitcoin. They're scared to do these things. And my encouragement is, think this through. ask through the questions, think through your risk tolerance, talk to your financial advisor, do the math, and decide what kind of allocation you can stomach. And my big encouragement is get off zero, because when the world gets off zero, when the US government itself gets off zero, when other Magnificent Seven corporations get off zero, when this happens, when the world gets off zero, not even to a 1% allocation, that's a $1.3 million Bitcoin in today's terms. All right. By the time we actually get there, we may not be looking at a 1.3 million. We may be looking at a, 1.5. We may be looking at a, 2 million Bitcoin, right? We really don't know how high this is going to go because of fiat debasement. And I can't believe I forgot earlier, but Ron Paul is also a part of the Trump transition team, right? And so with that, with him joining, hopefully that would lower inflation. But, I think that's going to be an incredibly difficult task for them to do. Now, opinion time, right? Okay, I've been talking a while. Let's get into talking about, okay, yeah, Luke, we get it. Bitcoin's going to millions of dollars. What's going to happen in the near term? This is my opinion of what's going to happen in the near term. If you're considering, should I buy Bitcoin? Is $75,000 too expensive? Bitcoin seems expensive. Should I buy more? Should I buy not? This is my opinion, okay? It is expensive. Bitcoin has never been this expensive before. Literally anyone holding Bitcoin is in profit today. Congratulations, you made it. However, I think in context of the future, it is still cheap. If we think about the internet, again, focus on the big idea, less in common with the future than the past. The internet has never had more data on it today than any point in human history. The internet has never had more users today than in human history. And yet nobody is asking me, Luke, are you too late to the internet? Okay. Yes, the internet has never had more users, more data, and more active hours every day used on it ever in history before, but it is never going to be this unused again, right? Like literally at any point in the future, a week in the future, a month in the future, a year in the future, a decade in the future, no matter what point in the future, the odds are the internet's going to be bigger than smaller. And I think the same exact concept can be applied to Bitcoin as well. There is a non-zero chance Bitcoin price falls. We could see $60,000 Bitcoin again. We could see a $50,000 Bitcoin again. We could even see a $40,000 Bitcoin. I think personally, $30,000 is already exceedingly low probability. I don't think we're ever going to see $30,000 again. I don't think we're ever going to see $20,000 again. I don't think we're ever going to see $18,000 again. In my opinion, those days are gone. You missed it. Okay. You missed the train at 20 grand. You missed the train at $200, but you can still get on the train before 200,000. Okay. So again, it's all probabilities. Think in terms of probabilities. This is my big encouragement. Don't think in absolutes. Everyone wants to tell you there's an absolute. Oh, buy my trading indicator. You can get absolute guaranteed results, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. Think in terms of probabilities, not in certainties, right? And now, if we look at the last cycle in 2021, the Bitcoin cold storage moving average increased by a factor of 3 last cycle from this approximate point in the cycle. And people generally in Bitcoin's history throughout every single cycle consistently take profits around 4x of their personal cost basis. This makes personal sense to me, right? People are not satisfied with a doubling in their net worth. They want more, but a 10x is such a high amount that people typically start taking profits before then. So you can look at the data. I'm not going to get into it now because the video will be even longer than it already is, but typically 3 to 4x is where people start taking significant profits on their personal cost basis. This is true when Bitcoin was $50. This was true when Bitcoin was $30,000, right? So if we take those assumptions, and those assumptions may not hold either to the downside or the upside, but if those assumptions hold, okay, right now, the cold storage moving average is just under $40,000. I believe it's $39,500. So basically 40 grand is the cold storage moving average. It's skyrocketed in the last few months. If we do a 3x from here, which is where if we overlaid last cycle today is what would happen, that would take us up to $120,000 Bitcoin moving average, meaning maybe in a year or two, Bitcoin price is $150,000, $160,000. The moving average is 120. That sounds about right. And if we assume that people start taking significant profits at 4 times that moving average, that would be approximately $480,000 per Bitcoin. That's just under $500,000 per Bitcoin. In my opinion, this is not preposterous. Okay. I do think the odds are far lower that we hit that number than a lower number, right? Like I do think it's, again, it's all probabilities. $100,000 of Bitcoin, I think is exceedingly likely. $200,000 of Bitcoin, I think is pretty likely. 300, less so. 400, 480, less so. right? Again, I'm just telling you, if we overlaid last cycle to this cycle, we're easily looking at $450 to $500,000 of Bitcoin, more or less, depending on what exact data you pull. But assuming that, Bitcoin's a bigger asset, it's going to take longer, whatever, like, I do think it's more probable we significantly undershoot that 480 than hit that 480 or supersede it, right? But again, my point is that if you're not looking to buy Bitcoin over the next, couple weeks or months to sell it within the next, year or so, like as long as you have a long time horizon, then it shouldn't matter, right? Again, this is about a longer term perspective that even if we don't hit 480 next year or the year after, but the context I think is more important. Again, focus on the trend more than the data point, right? So the big picture, I believe $100,000 per Bitcoin is no longer quote unquote moon, but liftoff. This is what I mean by that. Okay, I posted this last night when we hit the all-time high. $75,000 per Bitcoin. 100 grand per Bitcoin is only a 33% move up. Okay, yesterday on the news of the election of Donald Trump, Bitcoin went up about 9.5%. Okay, for context, Bitcoin is still down against gold by a factor of 27%. Okay, let me say it again. A lot of people get excited with the $100,000. Oh, when are we going to hit 100 grand? Oh, that's going to be so exciting. Okay, and that is not what excites me anymore. That is only a 33% move, and just to meet the all-time high against gold is we're still 27% down, right? So in my opinion, $100,000 per Bitcoin is no longer some big exciting target that everyone's going to reach for. I think it is going to be liftoff. I think that if we get close to 100, we're going to go straight through 100 and we're going to go up above that, right? It's only a 33% move, and we basically moved a quarter of that yesterday, right? So again, these are just my opinions, but I do think $100,000 of Bitcoin is not nearly the significant price target that some people think it is, right? Again, focus on the trend, not the data point. Longer term, I believe Bitcoin will someday be $500,000, and most people still won't care. Okay, if you don't believe me, Bitcoin was $3,000 in 2020. People didn't care. Bitcoin was $18,000 at the end of 2022. People did not care. Bitcoin then went to 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand. Now we're up to 75 grand. People still do not care. Bitcoin is literally at an all-time high yesterday, and basically nobody cares about it, right? Nobody cares. Nobody is searching for it on Google. Nobody's asking their financial advisor about it. It is dead. The market is dead. It is quiet. It has never been this quiet in the last 4 years, right? We literally have more boredom now than we did back at $18,000 in late 2022, right? By every anecdotal experience, by every data metric online with search engines and everything else, right? Like excitement is not there. Now, the money is coming, but the retail excitement is not there. There's a lot more to come, in my opinion. So that I think is, again, the signal and the noise. I think that's the thing to pay attention to. This is not like some mania we're in right now where Bitcoin's 75 grand, right? I do think Bitcoin will be $1,000,000, and most people will still own $0 of Bitcoin. Okay, like over 90% of the world, I think, will not own Bitcoin when it's $1,000,000, right? I don't think $1,000,000 per Bitcoin is hyper Bitcoinization. I think it is very, very early. And the reason why is that we are currently less than 1/5% at global adoption. Right now, there's 4 million people that own Bitcoin and Bitcoin UTXOs maximum. I think it's significantly less. I think it's 2 million or less. But let's say it's 4 million. Okay, to have a 100x in adopters and users would be equaling us to 400 million people. If 400 million people is 5% of the human population, 5% of the human population. So a literal 100x. If you're the most conservative and saying we already have 4 million users, which I don't think we have that is just a massive multiple in users. And a $1 million Bitcoin is now barely a 10x away. We are 33%. Whoops, if I can find the tab back. We are only 33% away from $1 million per Bitcoin only being a 10x. Okay, that is crazy. That is insane. That is amazing, right? So again, big picture. If you're scared to buy Bitcoin at $75,000 and you wish you would have bought it at $65,000, okay, fine. Like you might get an extra 7% more Bitcoin, but don't miss out on the 33% move before the 1,000% move to Bitcoin over the next few years, right? Don't pick up pennies in front of a steamroller. Don't refuse going to, the event because you're worried about the gas in your car getting there costing $1.59 or whatever, right? Don't try to skim, don't try to be cheap and miss the big picture, right? Don't get so obsessed about getting your, little short-sighted returns that you miss the bigger picture. That's my encouragement. If you want to buy Bitcoin, I would say just smash buy it and don't think about the price, right? Your big focus, if you're into Bitcoin or wanting to buy more Bitcoin, your big focus is how do I control my emotions and how do I protect the Bitcoin custody side of this asset? In my opinion, don't even worry about the Bitcoin volatility. Anything under 100 grand is a screaming smash buy. Anything under a million too, frankly, but one price target at a time, right? So again, the future is going to, we have less in common with the future in the past. The future is going to be different, okay? This is really important for me to emphasize as we wrap up this video. There are roughly going to be 20 million holders of UTXOs in the far future. There are 330 million corporations. There are 70 million millionaires. If you're watching this and you have a Bitcoin UTXO, or you are currently wealthy enough in Bitcoin to own a UTXO, meaning if you have over, let's say, $5,000 worth of Bitcoin, if you have any amount of Bitcoin, a tenth of a Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin, 12.5 Bitcoin, 85 Bitcoin, 3 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 9 Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. Any amount of Bitcoin you have, any of those numbers is going to be a very significant amount of wealth if and when Bitcoin is adopted by the world, okay? You are a part of the elite, lucky, fortunate 20 million people that figured out Bitcoin early on and actually bought Bitcoin, right? Everyone else, the majority of corporations, 90% of the corporations will never own UTXOs like you have. And my encouragement there is to keep this in mind. Please keep this in mind because nobody is talking about this. We, in my opinion, are nearing saturation for Bitcoin exchanges and for Bitcoin single sig. I think the future is mostly corporate paper for paper Bitcoin, multi-sig arrangements, and layer twos. Okay. Right now, single sig users, again, there's single digit millions, but there's 20 million UTX holders, right? So if we're saying that, right now, single sig users are a significant percentage of that, in the future, like most people aren't going to have that, right? If literally every UTXO is enough wealth for 3 generations, like most people in Bitcoin right now are going to have some portion of their Bitcoin in a multi-sig, right? Let's say someone has 3 Bitcoin. Right now, they got it all in a single sig they memorized or whatever. And that's great when Bitcoin's 75 grand. Well, I don't think it's great actually, but they might feel fine. But the reality is that when Bitcoin is $10 million a coin, you're not going to want to carry 30 freaking million dollars worth of Bitcoin in your head or in your house. You endanger yourself, you endanger your children, you aren't protected against lawsuits, you aren't protected against, a nation state jurisdictional attack, right? Most people in Bitcoin are going to change their custody model. If you have Bitcoin on exchanges, please, please, oh my goodness, fix that. Get off of exchanges. And I think the easiest way for you to do that is to set up a multi-sig. People say, oh, multi-sig is complicated. Oh, multi-sig is expensive or whatever. I'm telling you, it's not nearly as complicated or expensive as you think when you have a service professional alongside with you, helping you do this as quickly as possible, right? So if you own Bitcoin and you want to own self-custody Bitcoin in your IRAs, if you want to own self-custody Bitcoin in your Superman super funds, if you want to own Bitcoin for your family in multi-sig vaults, if you want to have an irrevocable trust for your Bitcoin, do it by the end of the year. The United States is shrinking the benefit of an irrevocable trust from $13.1 million all the way down to $5 million at the end of this year, right? That's probably what's going to happen. You've got a couple months left. You have less than 2 months left, okay? If you want Bitcoin self-custody in an irrevocable trust, okay? If you have a significant amount of Bitcoin, right? We're talking, 10 Bitcoin, 30 Bitcoin, please reach out. Please do it now. I've talked to so many people in the last few weeks that are in this camp that need this and don't realize they need it. They say they might need it, but they don't realize the government is reducing the benefit of this tax structure by 70%. Okay, please, if you especially want irrevocable trust, do it now. Okay, if you want private placement health insurance where you can get income based on your Bitcoin, please reach out. Please consider this now. It's going to be something that's very big in the future. Okay, one of the biggest ones is leveraging corporate equity that people own, private equity, and home equity, right? If you have equity in your home, you're debating turning into Bitcoin. If you have equity in rental properties, you're debating turning into Bitcoin. If you have equity, any other kind of form of private equity, and you're debating, should I take out debt to buy Bitcoin? The most important thing you can do is decrease your risk in your Bitcoin custody model. Okay. Now, a lot of times, again, the stereotype is that typically the husband is all into Bitcoin, the one spouse is all into Bitcoin. Maybe it's the dad, maybe it's the uncle, maybe it's the wife, whomever. And then there's the other person, the family member, the business partner, the wife, the kid, whomever, that is more hesitant against Bitcoin. Almost always, the big hurdle for the family getting on the same page and acquiring more Bitcoin is the fact that the spouse, the kids, the family, the friends are not sure how to recover the Bitcoin. They're scared of losing the Bitcoin. They don't have the confidence, right? And this is what I'm thrilled to do to help people gain that confidence to then buy more Bitcoin. I've got about a dozen, actually probably a little over a dozen clients I'm helping onboard right now. Probably at least 5, 6 of them are doing various kinds of equity just like this, ranging from 7-figure, over $1 million loans from their businesses. Others, $1 million loans in their houses, 6-figure loans on their houses, 5-figure loans, whatever it is, I don't care. The point is that if you're going to do this anyway, you might as well do it sooner than later, or at least have someone alongside with you that can help you lower the risk when it comes to that, right? Again, I'm not advocating for that necessarily, but if you're going to do that, consider doing that, right? Likewise, if you're looking to borrow fiat against Bitcoin in the future, because you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, you want to live off your Bitcoin, but not sell it, this is the way it is going to happen. Multi-jurisdictional multi-sigs are going to be the way for people to borrow dollars, borrow USD against Bitcoin, okay? And institutions are going to be willing to lend you fiat to live your life against your Bitcoin only in the custody solutions that are perceived as the lowest risk. And what are those going to be? Escrow compatible vaults. So if you want an escrow compatible vault that is going to decrease your Bitcoin custody risk and increase your confidence in Bitcoin, please reach out down below. Link in description. Okay, you can find a link down below. I'll get into more in a second why I think that's really important. Whether you use me or not, please just do it. I'm encouraging you to do this as soon as possible. Why? Because you have a non-zero chance of dying. Again, think in probabilities. Ask yourself right now, what are the odds you're not going to be with us in a year, right? There's some percentage. If you're over 30 years old, that percentage is probably over 1%. If you're over 45 or 50 years old, that percentage is probably over 2%. There is a significant non-zero chance you're not going to be with us next year, okay? Don't worry about the 1 in 1,000 chance that Bitcoin could go to zero. Don't worry about, don't worry about that. Don't worry about the tiny, tiny tail risk that Bitcoin, the network, is going to die. Worry about the fact that you might die. And I'm not saying that money is the most important thing in your life. I'm saying take that encouragement and remember life is precious, life is short, and do these things now, right? So that is my encouragement. Get these things set up so you can enjoy your time. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to stress your partner or your spouse about this, right? Get this set up now because there's a non-zero chance that you're not going to be with us anymore. Okay. I have had people that have watched my videos in Bitcoin here that are no longer with us, which is sad. It makes me sad to think about, but one of these videos of mine you watch is going to be your last video, like inherently at some point. We're not going to live on this earth forever. So I think I made my point, but that is my encouragement. There is probably there's some intangible risk to your Bitcoin. Maybe it's as low as 1.5%. Personally, I highly doubt it's that low for you. Maybe it's 5%. If you combine the risk of passing, the risk of having a lawsuit waged against you, the risk of losing your Bitcoin keys in your own lifetime, the risk of the tax man, the risk of not having proper UTXO management, combined all of those risks, I think it's easily between 1.5% to 5%. Okay. In reality, it's probably more like 2 to 5%, right? With the Bitcoin Advisor, you're going to have about a 0.5% tangible cost and probably a 0.1% intangible cost expense to your Bitcoin. Okay, reducing the intangible expense, reducing the net expense of your Bitcoin custody model from 5% to approximately 10 times smaller. This is how you buy more Bitcoin. This is how you justify borrowing money to buy Bitcoin. This is how you orange pill that rich uncle you have. This is how you orange pill that business partner, that church pastor, or whomever you have. This is how you do it. Give them a custody model that is so obviously secure, that is so much going to increase their confidence. They can't help but to buy Bitcoin. Then you can stop sending them all these podcasts and berating them over the head, telling them to buy more Bitcoin. The solution is so low risk, they can't help but buying more Bitcoin on their own behalf, right? I've seen this all the time with dozens and dozens of clients of mine directly and hundreds of clients indirectly at the Bitcoin Advisor, right? So this is the fastest way to orange pill your loved ones, to help them understand Bitcoin. Give them a solution where they can't screw it up, where they can't lose their Bitcoin. This is the fastest way to justify high allocation to Bitcoin, especially in terms of debt, right? The worst possible thing you can do if you borrow 100 grand to buy Bitcoin is have an annual intangible risk of 3 to 5% of losing the underlying asset, right? Reduce the risk, and all of a sudden the interest rate for the debt doesn't matter. You can justify borrowing more Bitcoin, right? And again, the important thing here is getting off exchanges. Okay, if you're watching this and you still are on exchanges, please reach out. Please click the link in the description below and get this done as soon as possible. And to quote Michael Saylor, take all your money and buy Bitcoin. Then take all of your time to figure out what you can do to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin. And take all your time to figure out what you can sell to buy Bitcoin. And on Luke's team at the Bitcoin Advisor, there are 40 people in over 12 different countries around the world that are spending all of their time helping clients figure out to buy more Bitcoin, right? My current track record is 51.2% more Bitcoin for clients within the first 12 months. Oh, Luke, how do you do that? It's because we obsess about this. We have a team of 40 people that are obsessed about this all the time. You want on-chain analysis? Good. We give you on-chain analysis. You want to have private placement health insurance with your Bitcoin to have, income on your Bitcoin? Good. We'll help you do that. Okay. You want to sell $1 million real estate property? Good. We'll help you do that. Anything we can do to help you acquire more Bitcoin is in our interest to do that for you, because that's how we keep clients, and that's how we have happy clients. This is exactly what the company has done since 2016, and we're looking forward to do it for many years to come, right? So if you're somebody watching this video and you say, I want to have an average of 50% more Bitcoin within the next 12 months, please do it now. Because as Bitcoin price goes up, this percentage is going to collapse. I suspect within a year, it's like 30% or so, right? So my track record for the previous year has been, on average, clients increasing their stack by 50%. That means, if someone's had 10 coins, now they're at roughly 15 coins. If someone started out with 1 coin, they're now at 1.5 coins, or whatever the number is, right? My point is, I suspect within a year, this is only going to get more difficult as Bitcoin price goes up. Okay, right now I'm helping a little over a dozen new clients get signed up. I've got room for probably 5 more. I'm already busy like crazy out of my mind. So if you're watching this and you want to be one of the 5 people that can join, and we'll brainstorm how to help you buy more Bitcoin, I'd be happy to do that for as long as I have time. But my time is already basically up, even though Bitcoin sentiment is basically still dead. So please do it now. Like, again, I don't care. I'm not saying this for me. I'm saying this for you. Like, I don't need to pitch this. I'm going to get plenty of demand. Every single client I have is going to send 10 people my way and their family when they realize this is the fastest way to help them orange pill the low ones. Like, I don't need you. I don't need you to become a client. I'm just telling you, you are a fan of mine. You watch my videos. I care about you, and I want you to buy more Bitcoin. And that's going to be much easier when Bitcoin's 75 grand versus in 6 months when Bitcoin's up, a few percent a day over 100 grand, and everybody's reaching out, and I have time for nobody, right? That's my big encouragement, right? I will probably be able to help, maybe 100 to 150 people this cycle, right? But if only a mere 500 people want this service, then the majority I just won't be able to help. Like, there will not be time. Okay. And the reality is that probably at least 10,000 people that follow me online are really going to need this, right? So if that interests you, text the phone number, text your email address to the phone number on the screen here, and use the phrase election, Bitcoin custody, Trump Bitcoin custody, or whatever, and request to get help. I'll be more than happy to help. Again, my incentive for clients is help them buy more Bitcoin. That is what makes our service valuable. We help people buy more Bitcoin. The fastest way we do that is we help people reduce the risk in their Bitcoin custody, at least by a factor of 2, in my opinion, closer to a factor of 10. That is the big picture. You reduce your risk by 90% when you go from dollars to Bitcoin. You reduce your risk another 90% when you go from exchange Bitcoin to self-custody Bitcoin to single sig. You reduce your risk another 90% when you go from single sig to multi-jurisdiction to multi-sig. And most importantly, you get access to a wide variety of financial tools and a service provider that can help you brainstorm how to buy more Bitcoin. Again, like Michael said, take all your money, buy Bitcoin, take over time how to borrow more money to buy more Bitcoin, then figure out what you can sell it to buy Bitcoin. Less than common in the future than the past. Focus on the trends. Click the link in the description below. Get a service provider that can help you navigate all the Bitcoin products and financial services, because the future is coming, and it's coming really, really quickly. Thank you. Please like and subscribe and do all that wonderful stuff. I'll see you later.